Welcome to Seeds of Hope, Regenerative Agriculture with Elena Garitas. I'm your host, and this is episode number 9. On this podcast, join me on a journey across the regenerative agriculture ecosystem through conversations with farmers, investors, change makers, and founders as we learn how to create healthier soils, communities, and food. Today, I'm thrilled to share my conversation with Rick Clark, a fifth-generation farmer from West Central Indiana, right on the Illinois line. I first saw Rick's story in the Common Ground movie, which you can watch on Amazon Prime. Rick has developed a systematic approach to regenerative organic farming that challenges conventional ideas about improving profitability and making a business case for regenerative organic farming. Side note, if you want to learn more about the difference between regenerative and organic farming, check out my conversation with Erica Campbell in episode number 8. In this episode, Rick and I talk about the challenges of transitioning to regenerative organic farming, the financial opportunities, and how critical it is to human health to reduce pesticide, herbicide, fungicide use and grow richer, more nutrient-dense food. Before we dig in, I'm still excited to share that Seeds of Hope is the official podcast partner of the Regenerative Agriculture Summit that's happening in Chicago from March 25th to the 27th of this year. Rick will be one of the speakers there, so if you want to join Rick and I, remember to use the code SOH for 10% off your conference registration. Now, get ready for a conversation about the business case for regenerative farming, how cover crops can transform soil health in a chemically free approach to farming, and how Rick recommends consumers and farmers get involved in the transition. Let's begin. Hi, Rick. How are you doing? It's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great today. Of course, every day is a great day, so it's all good.
Well, that's a good attitude to have. One of my coworkers used to say, I woke up, so I'm winning. Always starting off with a positive attitude.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation today and talking about your journey as a farmer and some of your insights that you've gained through your years of experience. But to kick us off, you've shared your story quite a lot in different podcasts and also on the Common Ground movie that came out last year. But some of our listeners might not be so familiar with it. And you made a pretty bold decision to completely transform your fifth generation farm, first to no-till and then to organic. And I'd love for you to share what pushed you to take that leap. What was the inspiration?
All right. Yeah, Elena, let's go back to 2007, where we were in full tillage mode. We were in full fertility mode, full chemistry, any and every input we were throwing at it. And we were doing our usual event in the spring where we were tilling the fields before we would plant our crop. So we were in this field, and bear in mind, this field that we were in was a 1% slope. That's hardly anything. I mean, it's almost flat. And we tilled the field like we normally do. And when we went home for the day, because the field was a little too wet to be in, so we till it to open it up and let the sunlight and Mother Nature, dry it out. Well, that evening we got a 1-inch rain event, and that 1-inch rain event on this 1% slope field, the erosion was unbelievable. It was actually out of the field into the ditch and onto the road. The field had moved that much. That's when I said, enough is enough. We have got to figure out how are we going to move forward and be better stewards of the land and be better conservation minded. So that was the catastrophic event that changed my mindset for where we are today. That's what got the ball rolling. Now, I had no idea how far we were going to take this then. but it just was a moment in time where it's time to make a change. And that's what we did.
So the rain washed away that freshly tilled soil off of your fields into the ditch. And did you intuitively make the connection that it was because of the tilling, the lack
Yeah,
of plant roots that the erosion happened?
that's right. That is exactly right. It just hit me like a truck head on, and I woke up and we realized that it's time to do something different. Now, what is that something? I'm not sure yet, but we've got to do something different. And then
And then yeah, and then you became a no-till farm. And eventually you also transitioned into organic, so you stopped with a lot of the chemical inputs that we were
right.
using to farm.
Right. Let's go through that part of the journey then. So in '07, '08 timeframe, I mean, the internet's there, but it's not great. I mean, it's slow, but it's there. So you can do a little research, and that's what I was doing. I was researching, and I came up with one species of a plant that I wanted to start with based on many factors. And that species of plant was called a tillage radish.
Hmm.
Now, the tillage radish is very good in many ways. Number one, it has a long, deep, penetrating taproot that'll go 4, 5, 6 feet deep into the ground, into the profile. And as it's doing that, it is mitigating compaction. So that's number one. Number two is this taproot is sequestering nutrients from within the profile, and it then stores those nutrients in a tuber that is right at the ground level. So all of these nutrients that radish has gone out and found is now pulled back to the surface, stored in this tuber. And then number three about the tillage radish is when you live in an environment that has a freeze event, which we do in the Midwest, then that will terminate that plant. So that plant dies. So there's no remnants of that plant growing next spring. Now, the dying plant is still there next spring, but it's dead. There's nothing regrowing. So I didn't want to deal with something regrowing because we've never done this before. So the radish was perfect. And we then did this on a 200-acre field, and we cut the field in half. So 100 acres of the field did not get the radish, 100 acres of the field did. And we did everything else the same except for we did not do any tillage on the side that had the radish. So we did no-till, planting of the corn crop. And that fall, when we harvested, that 100 acres that had the tillage radish in it was the best yielding corn on the farm and the best ROI, which is return on investment on the farm. So that right there, Elena, instantly told me that what we're doing here is the right course of action. And I want to make this very clear to the audience out here. If you're going to make a drastic change to your farm and you're going to decide to maybe start thinking about reducing inputs, farming regeneratively, you've got to have success on the first thing that you try. Because I'm afraid if you don't have success, you won't come back. So we were very fortunate. We had great success, and that just whetted my appetite for what can we do next. So that got us now to the phase of the journey of really starting to ramp up the cover crop no-till.
Yes, and you mentioned that cornfield not only was the best producing, but also had the highest ROI. And I want to get back to
Right.
that later as well. And you mentioned that how important it is to have that first success when you're starting to change
Yeah.
drastically. So you work with farmers all across the nation. You travel internationally, give talks and talk to farmers. Do you have an approach or a recommendation for people to increase their chances of having that success, especially in such vastly different contexts?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the first thing, and we got to remember that a lot of times when this um, consulting takes place, it's either a phone call usually or a Zoom call to start. Well, that's fine, but I really need to be at the farm and I need to have meetings with the people that are in charge of making decisions. What kind of a risk taker are they? Can they handle some stress? Can they be able to not have the best yielding crop in the county? Are they able to have a few weeds in their field? I mean, these are all, they seem like silly questions, but if you come across a farmer that says, I don't care what we do, I don't care how many times we have to spray, we are not going to have any weeds in our fields. These are farmers that are hard to move because they don't want to do away with the chemistry because they know that there's a weed going to come. So you got to understand who you're working with. Okay, that's number one. Then my recommendation is we need to do what I call baseline the farm. So we need to gather all the information we can about the farm. What's your tillage practices? What are your fertility practices? What chemistries do you use? How often do you spray chemistry? I mean, you need to spend hours with these people and get as much information as you can. So now you have an understanding, and you're exactly right, Elena. If I'm in Southwest Missouri, they're going to be a little bit. I mean, the principles of soil health still apply, but they're going to be a little different than we are. You are exactly correct. So once you understand that context, then you come up with a plan that is going to work for everybody. And everybody has to start to understand that now this is no longer a yield game. This is a return on investment game because the first question almost everybody asked is how much yield drag is there going to be? How much yield am I going to lose by farming this way? Well, we have to stop thinking about it like that. It's not how much yield are you going to lose. It's how much income, net income off that acre are you going to either make or not make. That's what this all boils down to.
Right. And our current farming system is really built around yield and quantity
Oh,
over quality, whether that's the quality of life of the farmer, the nutrition density of the food, or the quality of the farm's balance sheet.
that's right. That's exactly right. We have lost our way here. We are only caring about maximizing yield and not building any kind of nutrient density for the health of our people. We've lost our way. We can get back, but we've got to make a stand and we've got to start changing some of the practices that we do to raise an acre of crops that we consume or our livestock consumes that then we consume that livestock at a later date. So it all ties together.
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about you've experienced the conventional farming business, no tillage, and now regenerative organic. And when you think about the profitability of your farm in those three scenarios, what have you discovered in your experience? How has your ROI changed? How has your
Yeah.
profit and yields changed? I'd love to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, that you are asking excellent questions, okay? Because this is the type of information the audience needs to hear. Excellent. So when we were starting through our journey of regenerative farming, okay, we're not organic yet, okay? It's we're starting to reduce inputs. We're starting to increase our acreage of cover crops. We're no tilling. All of these things now. We're heading toward a direction. And when this is the secret recipe for when our farm and I apologize, we should have told the audience where I'm from. Our farm is located in west central Indiana, right on the Illinois line. So everybody almost everybody knows where Champaign, Illinois is.
Mm.
Come straight east into Indiana and go north a few miles, and that's our operation. Okay, so where we're located, this was our recipe for the best ROI that our farm has ever seen to date. Now that doesn't mean it's going to change in the future, but to date, we were 100% no-till, 100% cover crop, 100% non-GMO, and 70% reduction of input. 70.
Mm.
When we were at that point, we were still increasing yield year after year, and we had decreased inputs down to 70% reduction.
So you
Now,
were
can you
using
get
30% of the inputs that you were using previously.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, can you do this everywhere in the world? Probably not, because of inherent plant material, inherent organic matter, or inherent nutrients that are available within the profile. Okay, that's fine. But let's figure out on your farm how far can we take it, and then we find a spot. Then you stay there for a while, get comfortable. Then you decide if you want to start chipping away at another 3%, another 5%, and see how far you can take it. But we have to understand also, Elena, that we cannot jeopardize the livelihood of our farm. So, you've got audience members that are going to hear this. They're going to be excited. They're going to be happy. They're going to say, wow, we can do this. But you cannot go out tomorrow and take all of your inputs away. You can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand that we have to get the farms in a position where they're ready to be put into a systematic approach to take inputs away. Then we start taking them away.
So it's a incremental shift rather than a cold turkey transition.
Yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard it's too hard on your pocketbook. It's too hard on the soil. It's just too hard on everything.
Yes, I hear you. So you were mentioning that even in those first few years for you, when you were reducing inputs down to 30%, you were still seeing yield increases, which is
Right.
contradictory to what some people might expect. Were you
Right.
also seeing profit increases during that time then,
Sure.
since you're
Oh yeah.
decreasing your costs?
Yep. That's what I was trying to at that 70% reduction. So our ROI was doing this, going like this. When we hit the 70% reduction, we pretty much plateaued out. And that's where we had maximized our ROI, and then we started to plateau.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at that point, a 70% reduction is incredible. I mean, the initial savings dollar per acre is huge. We're getting close to $400 an acre at this point of savings of inputs.
Wow. And how big
So
is the farm? What does that amount to in totality?
right now, where we are with being full blown organic and the absolute elimination of inputs, so we're 100% reduction. We're at about $2.7 million.
In annual savings.
So we're farming just short of 7,000 acres, and we're doing this organically. And this is hard, Ellen, to do that many acres with organic, trying to do this with no tillage, no anything is very, very difficult. I do not recommend it at this point in time. I do recommend, though, some kind of a regenerative system to reduce inputs. That is imperative. I'm over here on the other side of the room of taking everything away. There's farmers on the opposite side of the room that have taken nothing away, but they want to get started. Let's figure out where we can meet right here in the middle, and let's get some of these regenerative principles in place and start reducing input.
What would you say is the most challenging part of farming regeneratively organic that brings you so far as to say you don't currently recommend it with, I suppose, the support structures that are available to farmers? I'm not sure what the variable there is.
Yeah, honestly, right now with with me trying to abide by the principles of soil health, the hardest thing to deal with are the weeds
Mm.
because we have no chemistry, and I'm trying not to do this with any tillage. So there's nothing left to suppress weeds except for the cover crops that you grow. So the cover crops become imperative for your success because the cover crops are doing many things. The cover crops are holding the soil in place. They're feeding the microbes with exudates. They're becoming solar panels for photosynthesis to build that carbon going into the profile. All of these things these plants do, and some plants also fix nitrogen. So we need that nitrogen to grow many of the crops that we plant. So those are the major things that the cover crops do, but the other things that the cover crops do are suppress weeds. So we have to grow cover crops that we can mechanically terminate, not with tillage, but with a flail chopper or a roller crimper. And then as you roll that cover crop down, you then put a mat down on the soil that is a barrier for the weeds. So you've got a mulch or a thatch or however you want to look at it. And now the weeds can't grow through this because there's no sunlight getting down to them.
Mm-hmm.
So the cover crops are how we suppress our weeds.
One question that has come up for me. So the weeds cannot come through the cover crop mat. How can the crops break through that mat? Or what is the process there?
Well, great question. So typically let's talk about soybeans, for example. There's two ways we'll do soybeans. We will go out when and the plant we're going to use in this instance is cereal rye.
Mm-hmm.
We will go out in the spring when the cereal rye is at boot stage. That's about 3 feet tall. And we will no-till plant our soybeans into that rye when it's at boot stage. And in 40 days, that rye plant will be at anthesis. And that's when you can roll a cereal rye plant down is at anthesis, and that will terminate it. Well, the beans are about this tall in there. They're growing with that rye. So we're rolling the beans and the rye all down together, and the beans just stand right back up, and now the rye is down on the mat. Okay? That's one way. The second way we do this is we will wait until the rye gets to anthesis, and then we will roll the rye down first, and then we will come in with our planter, and we will just ever so slightly open that rye up with our double disc openers. So, the rye is about 8 or 9 inches deep.
Wow.
When you've laid it flat. Okay, so you've got these plants are 5 or 6 feet long, and they're all just like this now. And it's about 8 inches deep, 8 to 10. And then when we go in with our planter, it'll kind of flatten that down the way that the planter kind of pushes it down. And we'll just ever so slightly open a slight crack, and the bean comes right through that. And there'll be a few weeds come through that as well, Elena, because we've now opened up that light. So you don't want to do this. You just want to do a little bit. And that's how we do the soybeans.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so depending on the stage of the cover crop and how resilient they are to something like being roller crimped,
Right.
versus the stage of the crop that you're planting, in this case, the soybeans, which are more resilient in that initial phase, you're able to let the soybeans continue to grow while terminating the cover crop.
That's right. So
Okay.
you've got a good head start on your soybean crop because let's go back to the first scenario. When you plant the beans into the rye at boot stage, and I'm just ballpark. This is not a calendar thing. This is a growth stage thing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But typically for where I live, that date is April 28th. So go 40 days past that, and if you do my second method, the beans are getting planted 40 days later than the first method. So you see, that's a big difference on now growth for the growing season.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on how you want to do it, or it depends on the cards that Mother Nature has dealt you, because back in 2019, Mother Nature rained every other day for 6 weeks in the spring, and we couldn't get in the field until June the 2nd. Well, June the 2nd is when the rye was anthesis. So we just went ahead and rolled the rye down first and planted the beans right behind it because that's the soonest we could get in the field. So everything still is dictated by Mother Nature. She's in charge. And we are just trying to understand how to coincide with her and work with her instead of working against her.
And being part of the ecosystem that already
Yeah,
exists around us.
yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, I'd love to move into the why organic part and talk about
yeah,
organic and talk about also the health, not only of the nature and the ecosystem, but also humans.
yeah. This is number one for me now. Okay, um, when I'm 61 years old, and when you get to be my age, you have a different perspective because you see, I'm on the second half of life. I'm headed toward the end now. When I was your age, I never thought about things like this. I just thought about we got to go, we got to do whatever it takes. We're impervious here. Nothing's going to slow us down. But when you get grandchildren and you get on the other side of life, you change your mindset. And now health becomes imperative. You don't understand how important health is until you don't have it. And when you don't have health, you don't have much. That's a problem. So that gets you thinking about things. So when when we started roller crimping the soybeans and the rye down together, and I was realizing that we could take the burn down pass out. So that's a chemistry pass that you use at planting time, and it kills everything.
Hmm.
And now you're starting your field with a clean slate. There's no weeds. That's called burn down. Well, we eliminated that. And we were now using post sprays only. And I couldn't believe how clean our bean fields were with no burn down and this one post spray.
Pro
So I thought
sprout?
post, P
Po-
O S
po-
T, post. So after the plants were up, that's post.
yeah.
You have a pre plant and you have a post plant. Okay. When when I saw what the roller crimper was doing and I saw how little of chemistry we were using, my first thought was, why aren't we going organic? Why aren't we just taking it away? Now, that is what got my mind right around this. Okay.
Mhm.
So and you can't be reckless about this. So the next year we started with 200 acres. So out of a farm our size, that's not very many acres. We did 200 acres and we took all the chemistry away. And we roller crimped, we planted the beans, we roller crimped them, the beans grew, we took everything away. That 200 acres was almost as clean as any of the other fields that we were using chemistry on. I'm like, this is perfect. We gotta move. We gotta roll. We gotta do whatever it takes. So now you go back to the internet and you start researching what does it mean to be organic, and you start to learn what you've got to do, and you've got to do all these things. Your ground's got to lay idle for 3 years, and then once it lays idle for 3 years, not idle, but no, I said that wrong. Your field doesn't lay idle. You're no longer using inputs that are not approved by the organic community, which is an acronym called OMRI, OMRI. It's an acronym. They make up the rules of what you can and cannot put on your farms.
Mm.
So you have to start farming like you're organic, but you're still getting traditional pricing for that because you're in a transition phase.
And there
So,
might be residue inputs
yeah,
still in the field.
might
Yeah.
be residue glyphosate or whatever's in the ground, and that 3 years helps eliminate or greatly reduce that. That's correct. Okay. So that that right there is how we got headed toward organic. That was 2017. When, I can't remember where. I can't remember if I was combining corn or if I was in a planter. I don't remember where this came to me, but it did. And I started to think about the human health aspect of what the farmer goes through. I mean, I start to think about through our family, and I'm like, we've got I've got a sister-in-law that died of cancer, got an uncle that died of cancer, got a 24-year-old nephew diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We've got diabetes in the family. Why? Why are these things? Why are they here? So now I'm up to this part in where I am in my life today. I'm 61 years old. I've got 3 beautiful grandchildren, and of course, it's on its way. You know what?
Mhm.
We're going to build a system here that they're never going to be around this stuff because I've grown up with this my whole life. I mean, I am the first generation of farmers that have been around chemicals their whole life. Now, let me quantify this. My father had chemistry also, but he didn't get chemistry until later on in his career. I'm standing there helping my father plant corn at 14 years old with chemistry. So I've been around this my whole life. So anyone my age, we're the first generation to be fully exposed to these caustic products. I don't want any of parts of that to be with my next generation. So that's one side of human health that I don't think people look at enough. Now, the other side of human health is building and growing a crop that is high in nutrient density. And that is imperative because, everybody wants to say, how in the world are we going to feed the world if we can't raise more corn and beans? They're looking at it all wrong. They need to understand that if you had a more nutritious diet, you wouldn't need as much food on your plate because what's happening is your body is consuming this low nutrition food and it's telling you to keep eating because you don't have enough nutrients yet. And the whole thing is a cycle that just becomes wrong. And so people they gain weight, they become diabetic because we're eating the wrong types of food. So we need to get the mindset shift that more is not a good thing, meaning more yield. We need more
Right.
nutrient density. And then the amount of crops that we're raising today are enough for the people that we have.
Yeah, and you bring up those two perspectives of health, first with the actual direct impact of you and other farmers who are interacting with those toxic chemicals
Yeah.
that came from World War II and were repurposed for farming every single day and have even been found in breast milk and, passed
Oh,
down through the food to the consumer as
drinking
well.
water. Yeah.
Exactly. It's infiltrating our drinking water. So that is causing a negative effect on our health. And then we also don't have the healing capacity of the food by having less densities. And you mentioned that one of your friends started the Food RX movement. And I'm curious to hear, has that impacted the conversation about how people farm as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that Aaron Martin in Oklahoma. Look her up. I don't know what her social media handle is. I'm sorry, I don't. But it's Aaron. It's ERIN Martin, Oklahoma. She has created the Food RX, which is that it's growing food at a prescription level to increase human health. And I believe their biggest push right now are diabetics. So once
Hmm.
and again, you just don't walk in and say to a diabetic, "This is what you're going to do." I mean, human nature is if someone pushes at you, what's our human nature to do? It's to push back. Well, that's not what we want. So the first thing you do is you educate your audience on why you are more than likely a diabetic. And once they understand that it has to do with nutrition and it has to do with exercise, they then understand why eating this balanced plate of vegetables, low carb diet is way better for their health than the current meal plans that they were eating. So that's kind of the premise of the Food RX. But I don't want to take Erin's thunder away. Your audience, go research her, follow her. She's awesome. Now, I unfortunately was not able to attend this meeting because I was busy speaking in North Dakota, but there is now a startup of this happening in Indiana.
Yeah, so you mentioned that in Indiana they are also launching a Food RX
Yeah.
chapter, or what does that look like?
I was not able to attend the first meeting, but it's in the incubation stage, and the desire is there from the group of folks that were at the meeting. So I'm very excited about where this could go, and I really like bringing this down to the state level and trying to get these organizations to to work within the state of their own group of people. I really like that. So I'm excited about what Erin is doing and has done here in Indiana, and not only in Indiana, but her presence is known about everywhere. So um, this is how this is how you make a movement get started. I mean, I personally think that the next thing, I can't think of a better word I want to say than just thing, but the next thing that needs to happen is the consumer needs to be educated on the nutritional value, or the lack of nutritional value of the foods that they're eating. Because I think, this is my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I think when a consumer goes to the grocery store and they buy an item off of the shelf in the middle of the grocery store, their thinking is there's nothing harmful about this product because the government is protecting me. The FDA says it's okay to be on this shelf, so why would this not be healthy for me? We need to get the consumer educated that they need to spend more time around the perimeter of the grocery store, not the in middle of the grocery store. They need to get to the fruits and the vegetables and the meats and the milks and the eggs and all of these things that are on the perimeter. And then we need to get the manufacturers starting to realize that the food they do put on the shelves could be healthier or less chances of herbicide or any kind of a caustic carryover into that food product. I want to stay right there for just a moment. I'm going to tell a quick story.
Go ahead.
I was in Iowa one time speaking, and there was a professor that spoke right in front of me, and he was from Iowa State, and he had a chart up on his slide, and he was going to tell the audience what the top 5 foods were that had glyphosate in them.
Hmm.
What do you think number 1 was?
I'm thinking a wheat product,
That's
maybe
a very
bread.
good guess. It was oats. Oats.
Ah.
And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world could an oat have glyphosate in it when there are no genetically modified oats grown? Because
Hmm.
that's when you'd spray Roundup. So I raised my hand and I'm like, "Sir, I don't understand. You gotta help me out here." And he's like, "Well, let me tell you what happens. When the farmers raise the wheat, and they have to have their wheat mature at certain dates because the combines are coming to harvest the wheat. So how do they make sure that their oats are going to be mature at the right time? They desiccate them. They kill them with Roundup just a few days before the combines get there. So you've got this head of oats that is sitting there almost mature and it's prime, and here you come with a spray pass of glyphosate, and all those oat seeds suck all that glyphosate in, and guess where that oat then goes? Into your oatmeal that you're feeding your children. These are the types of practices that have to stop. And this is what I'm referring to. So I, there's been a lot of people, not a lot, but there's been a few people that have really been pushing hard on this. And Food Babe is one of them. Vanny, what's Vanny's last name? Harris, maybe? Vanny Harris, maybe? But Vanny is the Food Babe, and she's been in the news a lot lately, and she has gone to D.C. to testify why is certain food companies putting products in our food that are poisonous to us. Mm-hmm. And she's making awareness that now we have a movement to start to clean up our food system. And I'm very, very hopeful that these folks can do what they need to do. And now we have RFK Jr. I don't think he's been fully put into the position yet, but he's up for Health and Human Services cabinet spot, and I truly believe that he cares about our health as a human being. He cares about our health. So I really like where this is headed.
Yeah, and you were also on his podcast, which I recommend everyone check out that episode. But I think that was something that has been missing from a lot of campaigns, talking about taking on big ag, those biochemical companies that are really pushing glyphosate, Roundup, and have a huge lobby. Also in the universities, which was something that really shocked me the most when I watched Common Ground for the first time. I remember one of the scientists said they have the best science that money can buy. And, as a community, as a society that really values science overall,
sure,
that holds a lot of weight and is quite skewed. So I think there's two places my mind goes. So first of all, in the terms of nutrient density, a lot of how we talked about this earlier, how farmers are incentivized are by yield, how farmers are compensated in terms of subsidies, etc. I'm curious what it would look like if farmers were compensated by the nutrient density in their food, by the quality of their food, if the incentives were shifted.
Would that be something?
Yes. And how much savings that could also bring on the healthcare part of the equation.
Yeah, exactly, Ellen. If you now start to understand that you're not going to have a healthy human being until you first have a healthy soil, and you start to realize the connection here, and then we take away a lot of these caustic herbicides and pesticides that are harmful to a human, you now all of a sudden the whole system is all changing now. We're not building these mega hospitals. I mean, I can't believe when you pull into a major city, what's one of the first absolute massive outstanding looking buildings you see? It's a hospital. Why is all of this money being poured into our healthcare? If we would just supply our human beings, our consumers, with good, healthy food, they wouldn't need to be going to the hospital as much. And there would be so much more money for everyone to enjoy and prosper in life.
And I want to get back to the policy part. I'm curious to pick your brain here, but I went to Acres last December, and some of the Understanding Ag guys, Alan Williams, Gabe Brown, talked about some research they're doing with a university in Utah, looking at the difference between nutrients of regular, conventionally farmed beef and regeneratively farmed beef.
Right.
And my mind was blown by the difference and how regularly grown beef can be detrimental to our health, but regeneratively grown beef has as much omega-3 as wild-caught salmon and a bunch of other characteristics I can't right now remember off the top of my head. But are you also involved in some of these studies with your farmed food?
We have not been as extensive as those guys have, but yes, we have done some nutrient density testing just so I could see, and you see it. not only do you see it on paper and you see it in the science, but we also see it with the people that buy our grain. I mean, we sell our organic corn to folks that have chickens that lay eggs, so they're called layers. And within a week of changing to our corn, they've called and said, we can't believe the difference we've seen in just a week of feeding your corn versus the corn we were buying.
The difference
So
in the
just the
richness of the
quality,
yolk.
yeah, the color of the yolk, the taste, the size of the egg, everything is different than it used to be.
Wow.
So those are things that validate that what you're doing is correct. And that's where we need to get to. And I don't need a lot of fancy schmancy equipment to say that what we're doing is right. I need validations like that. That's a simple phone call, and it reinforces that what you're doing is the right thing. And that's what you have to look for, those validations in everyday life. I don't care what it is you do. You've got to look for something that validates that what you're doing is working.
And sharing those stories also, so that to tie it
Yeah.
back to what you said about educating the consumer about what's
Yeah.
on their shelf, on their grocery
I
shelf.
mean, Elena, what you're doing here is exactly what we need. Constantly educating and putting information in front of the consumer. Look, it's out here. This is not pie in the sky stuff. These are real people doing this. So keep doing it.
Thank you for that. I agree. I think storytelling is fundamental to building movement,
Yeah.
building momentum, educating different stakeholders. So yeah, it's great that you take the time out of your busy schedule to do these podcasts with different hosts and speak to people all over the world. So
Right. It's
yeah,
important. It's important to tell the story.
absolutely, because that's how we connect to things, by understanding
Right.
stories and putting faces to movements.
Right.
So as we wrap up, I have two more questions for you. One thing you kind of mentioned this earlier, but what's one thing that you wish every grocery shopper knew about their food?
I wish there was and it's coming. This is coming. I wish it was as simple as having an app on your phone and you scan that food item and it tells you everything about where was this product raised, how was it raised, what processes went to raise it, what chemistry, what everything. Everything about it. Where was the farm? This is what I would like to have available for the consumer. And it's coming. I think it's in beta testing right now, so it's probably expensive. It's probably not quite feasible yet, but it would be great to get this down to an app on your phone, and you use your camera and you scan that code and boom, here's all the information. That's what I would really like to see.
I would love to use that. I actually use a similar app called Yuka, which is
Ah,
for any types of beauty products or cleaning products.
okay.
So if I had this for food, I would be really, really happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as we close out, do you have any advice for farmers who are considering transitioning to regenerative organic? Like, where can they learn more about the work that you do, or about what could be the first step for them?
Yeah. The internet is an amazing tool, and there are a lot of people now that are really coming out and voicing what their farm is doing, how they're doing things. There's a plethora of outlets. Now, if you like what you hear from me, my social media handle is FarmGreen13. If you do that, you'll find just about everything there is about me and what we're doing on the farm. But you need you need to get as much information as you can. Go to conferences, go seek out people. Like you mentioned, the Acre Conference. To me, that's top three conference in the United States. That is one of the top three to go to. It's in late December. It's early December. It's before Christmas, so most farmers are done in the field. They're packed everything away. They go to this conference. You went. It's a life-changing experience. Um, it's things like that that you need to look for and find. There's probably if you really dug through the internet, Elena, you could probably find a conference every week somewhere in the United States. So
Oh,
just
absolutely.
keep going, and not only go to that conference and listen to the speakers, but listen to the locals that are there. So like if I go to North Dakota to speak, that's great. I'm coming from Indiana. My message is the same whether it's in Indiana or North Dakota. That's great. But Eleanor, I'm going to get on a plane or a car and I'm going to go home. Find those local people in that audience and ask them, why are you doing this? How do you make this work here? Can you help me? And also reach out to the local government, the USDA, the NRCS, the SWCD. All of these people can help you down this journey and help you get started. But again, there's a couple things you have to do. You have to baseline your farm so that in the future you can see that what we're doing is right or not right. If you don't baseline the data, how are you going to know what you're doing is if it's right or not? That's number
Right.
one. Number two is start slow and easy on small acres and do not jeopardize your farm. And then go to as many conferences as you can.
Awesome advice. And you and I are also both going to be at the Regenerative Agriculture Summit in Chicago in March, which is how we got connected.
That's
You'll
right.
be speaking there.
That's going to be good. That'll be good. We'll get to meet, and I've seen the lineup of speakers they've got. That's going to be good.
I think so. I'm very looking forward to it, and all the listeners can get a discount. I'll mention that in the introduction. I'll put your social media handle in the show notes.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you so much, Rick, for taking the time, sharing your story, your perspective, and your knowledge. It was wonderful having you on the Seeds of Hope podcast.
Elena, thank you. I'm honored. You keep up the good work and keep driving her home. We need all the help we can get.
Absolutely, it's a team effort.
That's right.
Wonderful. So have a great day. Looks like a beautiful day in Indiana, and I'll see you in March.
Thank you, Elena. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Seeds of Hope. Our wonderful theme music is composed by Dane Myers. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you never miss an episode. Share it with a friend who might find it inspiring. And if you're loving the podcast, we'd be grateful if you could leave a rating and review on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. It really helps others discover us. See you next time, and thanks again.